Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Environmental with Dandelion. This is our podcast where we deep dive into the intersection of sustainability and business. We are your hosts and the co-founders of Dandelion Branding. My name is Courtney.
I'm up.
Perfect. And today we are chatting with Greg Newbloom, who is the CEO of Membrion, which is a wastewater treatment technology company, and you're specializing in electro-ceramic desalination. Really, really cool. Can't wait to dive in. Thank you so much for being here, Greg.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. So, okay, let's dive into it. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, we're a spin out from the University of Washington. About 8 years ago is when the technology was created, and so yeah, basically we have a new type of membrane, a new process for being able to remove challenging contaminants from wastewaters, and so we go into basically the membranes themselves. What make them unique is their ceramic desalination membranes. So desalination membranes, most people are familiar with reverse osmosis, which has been around for more than 50 years. Works great if you're trying to desalinate like groundwater or seawater, things that are relatively benign that are there. But once you start having really kind of complex contaminants that come up in industrial processes, think acids or oxidizers, or you have particles that end up in your wastewater, or you might have organic molecules, all those things are really fundamentally incompatible with a traditional desalination membrane. So people are still using the processes that they were using, more than 50 years ago, pre-desalination, right? They're boiling their water, they're dumping a bunch of chemicals in, they're doing basically really inefficient things. And so what we're doing is instead of making the membranes out of these kind of more fragile polymer materials, we make them out of ceramics. And so ceramics are really well known for being able to handle harsh, complex environments to last a really, really long time. But no one had figured out how to make the pore sizes small enough for desalination, because you have to have a pore that's less than a nanometer in diameter to be able to do this. And so that's the process where we cracked the code on that. And now we're making the world's first ceramic desalination membrane, and going into a lot of these applications that are just super challenging, nasty wastewaters, things you don't really want to come in contact with, but are actually super common. And we've got to figure out a way to kind of treat them properly and ideally reuse the constituents in there, because there actually is a lot of value in there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. On our last episode, we had Sam Schutte, whose business is Syntheca, and they do anaerobic digestion. And he was talking about how wastewater is their biggest issue. How are you finding this sort of like interconnection with these other industries to tell them, hey, we have a new product. It's available at scale. Like, how is that process for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it is a lot of kind of raising awareness and education, right? It hasn't been done before. It's a lot of people, when we talk to them for the first time, they're amazed, and then they're immediately skeptical, right? That's like, okay, like, is this too good to be true? And that's great. Like, we actually love when people like put us to the test. And I think one of the ways that we often interact with folks is we actually tell them, like, hey, look, in working with us, like, you don't actually have to pay us until we're actually starting to save you money at scale. So we walk through the process of testing their water, doing techno-economic analysis. We'll actually deploy the full commercial system on their site, and basically what we structure the contract as is just they pay us for $1 per, some dollar amount per treated gallon of wastewater. And so it's really, what we found is that helps to kind of fundamentally de-risk a new technology, because basically if we don't work, they don't have to pay us anything. So for them, we're basically just saying, like, hey, we believe in ourselves enough that you actually don't pay us until we're successful. And then when we're successful, you get they're saving money, their CO2 emission reductions, water savings, all the benefits kind of flow from that. But they flow out of success as opposed to try to convince people that we can do all these things. So kind of like to say the proof's in the pudding. So we just get them there.
Wow, that's really cool.
I'm curious, like, where would this industrial wastewater go if it wasn't treated in such a way that it could be reused? What happens to it, I guess, normally?
Yeah. So normally, this is some of the crazy parts. So we work we work across a lot of different industries. Predominantly, kind of the core focus area that we have is with facilities that generate acidic wastewaters that contain regulated metals. So think, copper, arsenic, mercury, lead, things that you definitely don't want coming back into our groundwater supplies. And so a lot of these facilities are using a combination of chemical precipitation. So they're dumping lime or other things into the wastewater in order to precipitate out these metals. And then they get those into a sludge. And then they typically are trucking that sludge to some intermediary. And usually what ends up happening is that gets combined in with concrete. And then that concrete goes to a landfill. And then you hope that is encapsulated well enough that those metals don't leach back out of that landfill and back into the groundwater supply, which, surprise, surprise, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
Right? Like no shock. And so you can give me...
Also, concrete so porous. I'm actually shocked by that.
Yeah, so they will. Yeah, so they're basically trying to encapsulate this as best they can. But yeah, you look at any sort of landfill leachate type materials, and you've got all these heavy metals that are coming out. It's a big problem for landfills as well, right? They don't like that. But that's a lot of the kind of base process. And in a lot of cases, what's interesting is, with the facilities we work with, a lot of times they'll have, copper or cobalt or nickel or other, valuable metals that are in there. And it often, in many cases, we're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of residual metals that are not going back to be used, right? We mined them once. We had a huge environmental impact in that mining process. And then, we didn't end up using them efficiently or as efficiently as we could. And, and they don't get reused. And so I think part of what we do is in being able to remove those metals and then concentrate them is you actually can return them back to a usable state. So a valorization process where you kind of are able to get that circularity both of the water, but those metals actually are intrinsically valuable as well.
Wow. So are you also part of the, I guess, I want to call it like remining process? Is that also something that you're kind of doing?
Yeah, so we're able to, a lot of facilities go from having a wastewater stream where the metals are fairly dilute, and they're dilute meaning, parts, tens or hundreds of parts per million, still way more than you'd want in your drink, thousands of times more than you want in your drinking water. But from a actual like usefulness standpoint, way too dilute to be useful. And so what we do is we pull them out into a much smaller volume so they get much more highly concentrated. And now you've got this kind of metal rich stream, which there actually are processing facilities that can then take that and valorize that. So we basically go from turning the waste from a hazardous wastewater stream into a valuable stream that then in many cases facilities will actually pay to take because it's actually it's worth money to them to take it. And so
yeah, fantastic.
And then I guess the clean water, that what happens with that after the water?
So ideally, we always like to see the facility reuse that water, either return it back to the front end of their process. Many facilities will use kind of reverse osmosis to purify any of the feed water coming in, make sure you got that consistent water quality coming into your processes. And so a lot of times what we can do is basically just take what's coming out of our system and blend it into the feed water. So reduce their, either consumption from their groundwater sources or surface or municipal sources. So they basically are able to then recirculate that water. In most cases, it's cleaner than what they're going to get from the city anyway, after it's coming out of our process. And so, and then it reduces their costs. Obviously, if they don't have to buy that water, then then that's further cost savings. So it's all ultimately up to the facility we work with as to whether they choose to do that or they choose to discharge it. But we're finding that more and more, facilities are wanting to find ways to be good stewards of their water and see that kind of reuse come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a big difference sustainably too, right?
Absolutely.
Reusing your water.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, speaking of sustainability, before we ask our favorite question of the show, I do want to remind you out there in the audience to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any inspiring sustainability talks we have. We post 2 a month, the first and third Wednesdays. So Greg, can you tell us, as many words as you want really, what role are you and Membrion playing in this transition to a more sustainable future?
Yeah, I think, kind of our mission as a company is to enable circularity of the world's most valuable materials. And so, we look at water being one of those. A lot of the critical metals that we work with are another set. And so really for us, it's trying to kind of move from a history of single-use everything because, we could and it was cheap and it was easy. And in fairness, things lasted a lot longer to now, kind of we have things that don't last very long that actually require a ton of materials. And I think we all know that the way we're going is not sustainable. But by kind of leveraging new technologies, I think we're able to make that shift. And I think one of the really unique things about Membrion's technology in particular is that we're able to help make that shift towards a circular economy without a green premium. So people actually pay less than the single-use approach to go circular. And so I think that's one of the things that we emphasize is we want to make, adopting a circular approach something that everyone in the company can get on board. Even the CFO can look and say, this is saving me money. Why wouldn't we do this? Because inevitably, good intentions are one thing, but businesses are still going to want to turn a profit, need to turn a profit. And so we want to help them be more profitable in being more sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, that's just good business, right?
That's just good business. Exactly. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. We kind of operate in a similar way of we make websites and content more efficient. So why not? It brings in better traffic. It's kind of the same argument. It's like sustainability doesn't need to have a green premium, as you put it. That's a really nice way.
Absolutely.
It can be profitable. That's fantastic.
So you were saying this technology, it was developed with the University of Washington. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So I developed the technology when I was there as a postdoc. And so that was, part of the project that I was working on was we're trying to create a new membrane that could withstand these really kind of harsh environments. And ended up kind of the inspiration for the materials were the silica gel desiccant packs you find in the bottom of a shoebox or a beef jerky package. That's the materials that we actually make our membranes out of, and those are really good at being able to transport, to be able to absorb water because they have these kind of molecular sized pores. And so what we've done is figured out how to make those into flat sheets, but then also control the pore sizes and the surface chemistry in order to be able to do this desalination process.
Wow. So is that ceramic? Like I'm looking at this, this is ceramic, but it's obviously not this.
Not the same. No, not the same. So it's basically the ceramic that you've got is something that one of the key characteristics when we typically think about ceramics is that they're fired. And so that actually is one of the reasons that they're more expensive is because they typically go through a high temperature calcination or sintering process. And one of the really unique things that we do is we actually work with the ceramics in the amorphous phase, meaning that we do all of our processing at room temperature. So our membranes are actually super flexible. You could actually take this ceramic material and roll it around your finger and unroll it. And so it's much more similar to some of the new cell phones that can they have the bendable glasses and stuff like that on the screens. Much more similar to that, where it's very thin and it's more amorphous, and so you can actually make these flexible ceramics, then ours just happen to have a bunch of very, very small pores that are useful for desalination.
Very cool.
Right? Crazy.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you have 40 patents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And still, and continuing to file more. There's, it's really, for us, it's one of the most interesting things. It's really is because people rarely work with the ceramic materials in the amorphous phase, and we're the first ones to figure out how to make a desalination membrane out of them. The just kind of availability of space to invent is massive, which I think our team, we've got a lot of scientists on the team, so they have kind of a playground of being able to invent and create and be creative, and in the process solve some really important problems, which is the fun part.
Absolutely. Wow. What a great combination of scientific kind of curiosity and like this amazing opportunity. Like, that's so exciting.
It is. It's an absolute blast. Absolutely.
It's cool. I love it. I love when we have guests that are just love what they do. And I'm like, let's just talk about it. Wow. Really cool. So it's called electro-ceramic desalination. The ceramic part, I'm not going to say we get it because that's just pure science.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We got it. What about the electro? Is it?
So this is the second kind of component of it that's unique, is that basically the electro components, typically when you have a desalination membrane, what you're doing is you're using high pressure to push water across the membrane, and you leave all the other contaminants behind. And so it's a very high pressure process. Our process actually uses electricity. And instead of moving the water across the membrane, we actually pull the ions across the membrane. So it's the ions that are moving and not the water. So you can imagine if you've got two electrodes, a positive and negative one, and you have something like sodium chloride, well, your sodium ion, which is positively charged, is going to want to move towards the negative electrode. The chloride is going to want to move towards a positive electrode. And you can basically orient your membranes in such a way that they can selectively transport those ions. But then when they want to keep moving, you actually put the other charged membrane on and you block them. And so you can actually create channels within these modules that make it so that they can only ever move across one membrane before they get blocked. And then that's the concentrate stream that recirculates and is able to build up very high concentrations of ions.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think the way that you have the visual on your website, where it's like a series of kind of sheets, is that sort of like actually what it looks like?
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. That is actually what it is. Yep, exactly. Yep. So it's a series of sheets. We pack, within a given kind of desalination module, we're going to put, somewhere between 200 to 400 sheets of membranes, and each of them are going to be separated by a spacer, and they're each going to have a channel that water is flowing through, and water is, either the ions are flowing in, and we're basically pulling them across the membranes into the concentrate stream, and that's how you end up with an ion-free stream at the end of it that's either reusable or dischargeable.
I'm lost at ion because, I guess H2O is like, it's not an ion.
It's not an ion, yeah. So that's where it's basically for us, and this is one of the kind of the unique things that makes us really successful, especially in dealing with metals, which are it's very common in industry to process metals with acids because they tend to dissolve in acids, and so they're in an ionic form when they're in this wastewater. So it's really easy for us to process them. But you end up with not every metal will be ionic, and not, water isn't ionic. And there's certain things that aren't ionic that could be contaminants, and those would just be streams that we wouldn't be a good fit for. So we're going to have certain, and those, when we work with facilities, those are the practical limitations that we say, okay, well, if you've got boron, for example, boron is dissolved in water, but it's not ionic. And so we can't remove it. And so if you need it removed below a certain limit, then we're just not the right technology to be able to do that.
Got it.
What is your typical kind of use case? What businesses do you typically work with?
Yeah. So like right now we have one of our installations is with a semiconductor manufacturing facility down in the Portland, Oregon area, and we're helping them to treat copper wastewater. So copper deposition and plating is very common in the semiconductor industry in order to make chips. And so they generate high concentration copper wastewaters that then have to be treated before they're discharged, because copper is biologically hazardous. And so basically we're able to go in and help it's very common within the semiconductor industry to actually take these wastewaters and truck them offsite for third-party treatment. And so what we're doing is we're basically helping to dramatically reduce the amount of trucking and, again, create that really metal-rich stream, which can then be easily reclaimed.
So you set up at the facility. Is it how big is it? How much of a space does it need? And is it scalable?
It's pretty compact. Yeah. So it's very scalable. So it's all modular based. So basically, you're kind of if you need higher flow rates, you just add more modules on and you get to higher flow rates. So from that standpoint, like at a facility, often our footprint is probably, about 20 square feet. It's pretty small. So you kind of like 3 feet by 7 feet. If you really stretched out end to end, you probably encounter as much space as our system. And so that's the other really critical part, because a lot of these facilities don't have tons of extra space to go adding new equipment in. And so we have to be really compact to be able to be additive to their process and be a retrofit to what they're doing today.
Wow. The word that comes to mind for this is just elegant. Like, it feels what you've built is really elegant in an industry that can be pretty heavy-handed.
I mean, we've got a phenomenal team that's been working on this for, we're 8 years in as a company. It probably took us 5 years to figure out how to go from making something the size of a quarter to making something that could actually treat a reasonable quantity of wastewater. And so, I think we are very, I think the team does a really nice job in listening to the customers and understanding the constraints. And really, again, like we want to, the goal is so much of who we interact with are, people in industry who really want to do good. They really want to have the more sustainable process, but there's just so many checks and balances and ways things get squashed. And so we're basically just, listen to those and make sure that we streamline it as much as possible. Again, that kind of, simplicity of process is, I think, really critical.
What do you think is the biggest, I would say, misconception or misunderstanding around what you're building, or even wastewater in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think in wastewater in general, it's like, I think it's almost intrinsic to the name that this is waste. When in reality, like, it doesn't have to be waste. Like, it's suddenly no longer usable in the form that it was previously, but that doesn't mean that is something that we have to waste. There's still an incredible amount of value that just needs to be unlocked. And so I think that even our nomenclature sets us up to think about something in a certain way, as opposed to really thinking about like, oh yeah, this is just a stream that hasn't had its value unlocked yet. And I don't have a better name for it. So if you've got a good name for that, that's great. But I haven't come up with that yet.
No, I really like it. Yeah, let's think about how to rebrand wastewater, Courtney.
It's kind of a theme amongst sustainability in general, though, that the need for folks to reevaluate how we think of waste in general, or what we consider to be waste. So that is, it's fascinating, but we do need a better term.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
So this technology, so you've developed this 8 years ago. Like, I guess, how are you finding that it's are folks kind of adopting it, or are folks starting to learn more about it? Is it growing in kind of adoption? Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that for us, we've been kind of, part of that journey, as I mentioned, the first 5 years of the company was really, okay, we've got an invention. How do we get it to be usable in the real world? And then that was about 3 years ago that we kind of crossed that threshold. Okay, we can make enough of this that we can now go out and actually treat meaningful amounts of water. And so we started that process of really learning where can we add the most value. Desalination, it can go into lots of different areas. And we really kind of over a year and a half to 2 years really found that these acidic metal wastewaters were just, there's so much value within them and so little options for how to actually treat them that we're like, this is a really good fit for our technology. And so, a lot of it was kind of just an evolution of figuring out where can we add the most value? Where do we do something that's really differentiated? And then for us, this year we had, as I mentioned, we've got a commercial system, running in the semiconductor industry. We're just about to get another one installed in the metal plating industry. We've got a whole bunch more that are coming through. And so for us, I think the exciting part is as we've found that area we can be really impactful, as we've seen customers respond in kind, which is that their level of enthusiasm is really high. It's like, oh wow, this is what I've been looking for. I just, didn't know it existed.
Yeah, that is awesome. And it's growing, right? The semiconductor world, the metal plating world, the mining, it's like one of the biggest industries right now. So yeah, it moves slowly in these sorts of infrastructure changes, but.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's I think one of the big things is that, everyone is, and I think especially as you mentioned on the metals mineral side, there's so much geopolitical stuff that's happening. How do we, even how ensure that we have a supply of these metals and minerals? We certainly don't need to be sending them to landfills if we're going to make sure that they can continue to be useful to us. So,
absolutely, yeah. Don't get us started on deep sea mining and all of the stuff that horrible ways that we could actually really injure our planet. But we don't, and we think about that before we think about something like this, where we could just, hey, it's already out. Just make it circular.
It's already there. That's right. Exactly.
Thanks for the work you're doing. It's really important.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And so if folks want to get in touch and they want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to keep in touch with us, we are very active on LinkedIn. And so that's probably one of the easiest ways to get in touch with us via our website. We've got the ability to get in touch. If people have, these sorts of wastewater streams, we're always excited to peek under the hood and see if we can be helpful. And so, yeah, excited to connect with more people.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Absolutely. Yeah, really enjoyed this. This is great.
And thank you for joining us and sticking around. We will see you next time.